All right, so now what we'll do is we'll solve a bunch of more problems to be able to fully grasp the concept of pattern problem solving, and we'll take a slightly higher level and slightly medium to like hard level problems in order to be able to clear our concepts. Okay, so the next pattern that is going to be is something like this. So if I give you n is equal to 4, the output should be this. Okay, similarly, if I give you a n is equal to 3, the output should be this. Okay, again, let's get quickly started first with identifying the patterns and then we will be solving it. So first of all, the total number of rows again is equal to n over here. Then we have to do some work. Let's not look at the first row because it's kind of like an outlier. If you will look at the second row, you have to do some work for the stars. Then you have to do some work for the spaces, and then you have to do some work for the stars. Okay, so it's stars, spaces, and then stars. Okay, and after that you will see over here that when you go from one row to the next row, the number of stars basically decrease. Okay, and you can see there are equal number of stars on both sides. Okay, the number of stars over here is the number of stars later as well. So you do stars minus minus, you do spaces plus plus, okay, and then you do stars minus minus again. Okay, so that is what the overall idea is, that the number of stars basically tend to decrease over here, okay, and the number of spaces tend to increase. Okay, so now for identifying the starting, like what is the basic value of stars and spaces you start with, that's going to be a little non-trivial over here because there will be a corner case. So you will see that initially in the first row, the number of spaces are 0, then the number of spaces 1, then 2, then 3. Okay. And over here, you will see that there was 1 space and then there was 3 spaces, right? So it's not even this. The idea being that if you start with spaces, they are always increasing by 2. Okay, so number of spaces here is 1, the number of spaces here is 3, and the number of spaces here is basically going to be equal to 5. Okay, so what I will do is, for this particular case, I will directly first print this row as an outlier. Okay, so what is the number of stars in this? It is 7. Number of stars over here, it is basically equal to 5. Okay, which is equal to nothing but 2 into n minus 1. Here also 2 into n minus 1. So first, let's just go ahead and print this simple row, because it's kind of like a outlier for us. Okay, so over here, int n value has been given to you. Now what you do is you go ahead and print the first row as it is. And so you run a loop. F row is first row is equal to 1. And how many times do you have to run it? 2 into n minus 1. Okay, and first row plus plus. And what do? You simply just do this and then you move to the next line. So you have the very first row. If the pattern would have been 3, you would have printed 5 times over here. Okay. Now basically this kind of pattern that you have to do over here is basically going to be for n minus 1 rows, right? Because the first row has already been done. Okay. And in this case only, from the second row itself, you follow the pattern of stars, spaces and stars, wherein when you go from one row to another row, the stars basically decreases by 1, the spaces increases by 2. Okay, the space was 1 over here, then the space was 3, then the space was 5, and the third one is also where the stars decrease. The initial value of stars is what? N minus 1, which is 3. You can see for the very first row, 3 and 3. Here also n minus 1 is 2 and 2. The number of spaces is basically 1. Okay, and here also the number of spaces initially 1, here also number of spaces initially is 1. So what do you do is, now you run a loop int t rows, first of all is n minus 1. You run a loop which is less than equal to t rows, and then you do row plus plus. Now you work for the current row. When you work for it, first you print stars, then you print spaces, then you again print stars, and then you prep for the next row. Okay, so in CST is equal to 1, CST is less than equal to total stars, and CST plus plus. And what was this value? In stars is equal to n minus 1 initially, because you can see there are 3 stars, then 2 stars, then 1 star. So for the value n is equal to 4. And the number of spaces is equal to 1. So in this case, what do you do is, you print a star and then you work for the spaces and then you print the spaces, and the third part is again you work for the stars. Okay, and here as many stars were there, over here is as many stars in the third part as well. Now you basically prep for the next row. For the next row you prep in the sense that you go first to the next line, you take the cursor to the next line, and then you do stars minus minus, and then the spaces increase by 2. And that is it. And you can see, there you go, your beautiful pattern is over here, right? See, again, when you move to a slightly more complex problems, you will come across cases where you will have some outlier rows, where example first row could be an outlier row and then the pattern is being followed in rest. So make sure you treat those outliers differently. But again, the overall idea being exactly the same over here. Okay, here also it's like you've created a matrix, kind of like a structure. Okay, identified your rows, identify your columns, and then try to work on it the very same way. Okay, so this is how you have to solve this I would say pattern over here. Okay, now we take one last pattern over here as well, and I think that's one of the most difficult patterns that are usually asked in interviews also, and we'll be done with this pattern problem solving session. Okay, we have solved approximately 6 to 7 problems, right? And they give a very holistic view of what different cases could actually exist. So the next one that you have is a sort of a butterfly shape pattern over here. Okay, for example, if I give you the value of n is equal to 7, the output would be this. Over here, okay, assume also over here that the input n will always be an odd value. For example, now if I give you for n is equal to 5, this will be your output. Okay, again going back to the idea for solving this pattern would be to kind of think of a matrix around this. Okay, so what are we really doing over here? The total number of rows is definitely equal to n. Okay, and then you have to work for stars a little bit, then you have to work for spaces, and then you have to work for stars. After that, you start always with the stars value 1. You take the first row over here, you take the first row over here and here. Okay, the stars is always 1, and the spaces over here you will see is what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here it is 3. Okay, so here the spaces were 5, here the spaces were 3, which is equal to always n minus 2. Okay, so the initial set of spaces that you have is n minus 2. Now there is something that works in the first half, and then there is something that works in the second half. In the first half, when you are moving from one row to next row, the number of stars is plus plus on both sides. Here also plus 1, here also plus 1. The number of spaces basically decrease by 2. Okay, after which it reaches to a particular point, the middle point, after which when you go from one row to next row, the number of stars basically is decreasing by 1. Okay, from here 3 to 2, 2 to 1 stars, and spaces basically increase by 2. Okay, here also there will be a separate case that you will have to handle, but let's first see actually how we can do this. Okay, that way you'll learn better and you'll understand the corner case better as well. Okay, so this is how we are moving. A total number of rows equal to n. We have stars, spaces, stars, and then we have stars, then you do stars plus plus, and then you have spaces. Spaces is equal to always n minus 2 of the given value of n, right? And then you first decrease the stars, you increase the space, you basically increase the stars, you decrease the spaces, but in the second half, you decrease the stars, but you increase the spaces. Okay, so int value n is equal to, let's say, 7, int total rows is 7, int stars initially is 1, int spaces initially is n minus 2, for int row is equal to 1, row is less than p rows, and then you do a row plus plus, and you work for the current row. You do stars, spaces, stars, and then you prep stars, then you do CST plus plus, over here, and this would be stars. The same thing that you're doing over here as well. For this, CSP is less than equal to the total spaces, and you do this, and then you try to print a space. How do you prep for the next row? First you take the cursor to the next row, and if, right, the current row value is equal or less than or equal to the total rows by 2, right, then what did we see? We see that we do a stars plus plus, and we decrease spaces by 2. Otherwise, in the else case over here, you do stars minus minus, and then you do spaces plus equal to 2. Now let's see where could we actually reach, right? I hope everyone can see over here. First of all, just correct this. Okay. First of all, I hope everyone can see over here that there is one extra star over here that is coming up. Okay. And that is a very valid case as well. Let's see how. So over here, if I go for a simple example of, let's say, n is equal to 5. So for row 1, what will happen is you have stars as 1 and you have spaces as 3, which is fine because you have stars 1 and then you have space, 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 and then you have a star. For row 2, because it's less than the total rows that we have, over here, what will happen is the number of stars will now be 2 and the number of spaces 1, which makes sense because 2 stars, and 1 space. Now what will happen is you will again increase because you are at row 2, which is less than equal to the total rows by 2. So for the next row, you will do number of spaces over here as minus 1 because you're decreasing by 2. The number of stars will be 3. Okay, so what will happen is you print 3 stars and then you print 3 stars again because there is no space. And that is where the actual issue lies in. If I show you a more clear representation, right? Ideally, in this case, you only wanted to print 5 stars over here because 3 into 2 formed up 6, right? But you wanted to print only 5 stars over here. Okay, so this is one case wherein you want so there are two sides, right? This side and this side. So there is this case where this side wants to print 3 stars only, but at this side we want to keep the stars as 2 only. Okay, but after this everything is fine. You are at row 3, so you need to decrease the stars. You need to do the stars as 2 and the spaces become again 1. So 2 stars, and then a space. So you're fine after that. Just that this row is having kind of a case over here. So for solving this situation, what you could do is you could say that if the situation is where you are right at the middle row, okay, the situation comes where you are right at the middle row, what do you do is you have to do these stars, right? So in this case, what you do is, so here let's say you do S stars. That means second stars that you have to print. It's always this, right, that you print. So whatever the stars value is, you always print that many stars only. Just add a normal if condition over here, that if you are at the middle row, instead of printing the stars value over here, just do a -1 to it. Okay, so this will ensure that the first half will print those many stars only, which is, let's say, 3 stars, or over here, let's say if I take the example of 5 only. So this kind of a condition will ensure over here that the one in the other condition, one second, let's go back to where we were, just so that you can get a very clear idea about what's happening. So in this case, we're having 1 extra star over here, right? Okay, so if you go back to the original code that we wrote, you have 1 extra star over here, right? Now, what I want basically is that for this particular row, okay, I want 1 less star to be printed on this side. So what is this row? This is row 1, row 2, row 3. Okay, so what I want is whenever I am on this particular row, which is t rows by 2 plus 1, I want the right side of this part to print 1 less star. Okay, that's why I'm doing stars -1. This will not affect the stars on this particular side. They will remain as it is. I just added a condition for the other side. Okay, so I just created another variable, that is the second stars. It will always take the stars value or variable which is having here. Just that for this particular row, it will just take a -1 value. Now let's see if it is helping us. And yes, indeed. right? By adding this small condition over here, whenever you will be at the mid row, right, instead of printing the total stars which were on the left side, on the right side, you will print just one less star. Okay, so here you had to add this one small condition over here in order to be able to fully implement the pattern. Okay, again, remember the basic idea, as in when you will scale the pattern problem solving questions also, the basic idea, the grid making idea will remain same. Just that you will have to add some small, I would say, corner cases here and there in those problems which actually try to assess your problem solving skills only. Okay, now you may run this for any pattern you like. Okay, and it will give you a very beautiful butterfly shaped pattern. Okay, so I hope with this everyone has very easily and quickly understood the idea of pattern solving problems, right? When you will solve a bunch of homework problems also, you will understand more on how this needs to be really worked out. But yes, for basics, this should be enough for you to get started. Okay, thank you so much for attending the problem solving session on patterns, and now we'll meet in the next one.